You're listening to the uMentor Talk Show, where we invite a panel of experts each week to speak about the incredible journeys and career paths. Today, we're talking to Salma Jaffer and Samir Ladha Dinani. Salma is an elementary school teacher in the Delta School District who helps third and fourth graders bring their learning to life. Samir is an attorney and associate director of the bioethics program at Columbia University, where he addresses the ethical, legal, and social implications of biotechnology and medicine. This week's show is brought to you by Project Visual. I'm Jawad Sharif, your guest talk show host. Make sure to tune in every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And remember, if you have any questions for our panelists, you may leave them in the comments section of our YouTube channel. Salaam alaikum, Salma. How are you today?
Alaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Salma, you are a third and fourth grade teacher, and when we discussed about your career earlier, it sounded pretty interesting. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So yeah, like you said, I teach third and fourth grade, and I'm an elementary school teacher. So pretty much the kids come to school and I'm with them the whole day. And I teach everything from language arts to math to science, social studies, and PE. So I like to say I do it all.
That sounds very intense.
I definitely have busy days, that's for sure. As you know, kids have a lot of needs. So, of course, I'm doing all the academic stuff, but there's also all the social emotional needs kids have, as well as physical needs. So it can be busy, but I love it.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
Sure. My parents moved to Canada in the 70s, and my parents came from East Africa, and their whole reason for coming to Canada was they valued education, and they just felt like if they came to Canada, that's what they could give to myself and my brother, and I think that just really instilled this love of learning and lifelong learning, if you will. And so that's really what I live by. I try and learn something new every day. So when I was in university, I my passion was for reading, so I majored in English. And the other passion I had was people. I just find people really fascinating. So my minor was in psychology, and I find every province and every state has different requirements for teaching. But for me in BC, it was a 4-year degree plus a 1-year teaching program on top of it. So
Right.
once I finished university, then I started teaching.
Oh, that sounds exciting. So you're a third and fourth grade teacher now. Have you tried teaching other levels and other subjects?
Yeah, so my area of expertise, I guess you could say, is kindergarten to grade 7. So I've pretty much taught everything from kindergarten to grade 7. I taught kindergarten for several years, which was really interesting. The little ones, they learn in different ways. So it was a lot of play-based learning, but it was a lot of getting used to school. So I had to do things that I wasn't really necessarily prepared for when I did my degree, but it was still great nonetheless. I did a lot of learning. I did a lot of teaching for special needs kids. So I worked with kids who are autistic or had any learning disabilities. So I did some work there as well. And then I now landed into this grade 3-4 position. I've been doing that for about 5 years.
Nice. And so, is there a difference in your teaching styles from grade to grade?
Oh, 100%. Like I said, with the kindergartens, I had to worry about things like making sure that kids knew to raise their hand, or making sure that when they asked to go to the bathroom, I let them go because they probably had to go if I wanted to not have any accidents in the classroom.
Right.
But with the grade 7s, of course, they're obviously past all that, and then you're able to you see little adults emerging, so you can take the learning to the next level. And um, you're also kind of having them take in information, but also learning how to interpret it, how to think about it, how to problem solve, how to be creative in their thinking. So I think it does evolve. The reason I love grade 3, 4, and this is probably my favorite grade, is because first of all, they love school. They love coming to school. They love me. It's really easy to build connections with them. And I find that they are past kind of that learning how to read and write stage, but they're at this really pivotal point where they are becoming versions of their adult self, and I can kind of help influence that, and I see all these little sparks of coolness that are starting to emerge, and I can really really engage with that. So I really like this grade the best. I say this is my favorite.
So everybody should take third and fourth grade, right?
Well, everybody has a strength for a particular grade. This is a good fit for me.
Right. Okay. All right. That sounds exciting. So, in terms of your education getting to this point, are there any specific courses or requirements that you think really help you excel as a teacher at this level?
Yeah. So again, I think when you're going into teaching, again, the requirements are really different. I've traveled a lot in North America, and I've found that the requirements among the different states and as well as among the different provinces are different. I think BC has the most stringent criteria. So I found a lot of teachers that are coming to BC had to get extra coursework to make sure that they could get certified in BC. Whereas if you were going from BC to Ontario, for example, it was a bit easier. But among the states, it's very different from state to state. So I know for some teachers that was a bit frustrating because they needed to know the criteria if they were thinking about moving, for example. So for me, it was a 4-year degree in anything. And like I said, I majored in English and psychology. And then it was the teaching program on top of that. And the teaching program has a lot of diversity amongst what you can choose. But for me, it was great to learn a lot about multicultural education, and I tried to do a bit in technology too because I thought that was something kind of up and coming. But still working on that, as you can see from the amount of time it took me to log on today.
That was a very short time. Yeah. So, you also mentioned in your profile that you're going for a master's in educational leadership, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how is that different from what you're doing now?
Yeah, so currently I just have a regular bachelor's degree. I have a bachelor's of arts and a bachelor's of education, and I think a lot of teachers do find at some point that they're ready to move on and get more. And it's different from person to person. Some people finish their bachelor's and they're ready to do their master's right away, but some people want to get some time working for a little bit, and that was the case for me. And then they're ready to do their master's later on in their career, that's what I'm going to be doing now. And there's different types of masters you can do out there. Some focus on literacy, some are technology based, and the one that I've kind of think is a good fit for me is one that's based on leadership, and yeah, and so it allows me to, if I would like to be a principal or a vice principal or get some sort of leadership role in my district, it allows me to do that. If I wanted to teach in a college or a university, it allows me to go in that direction. So I think for me, that's a good fit.
Right. And is that so you haven't really decided what you're going to do once you get the degree, or you already have an idea of what you want to do?
I'm still a little undecided. I'm hoping that that path presents itself as I start doing it more. I would like I've done some work with adults through the madrasa. I work at our local madrasa here. I mentor teachers in the Vancouver madrasa, but I also have done some work with madrasa teachers around North America, and I really did like working with adults. I never thought I would like that, but this opportunity presented itself, and I took it, and I really enjoyed it. So I do see myself working perhaps in a university or college. So I haven't ruled that out, but I do love being with the kids. So I haven't quite decided yet. So we'll see.
Right. And you mentioned you work with madrasa teachers as part of an Simco program. How is it similar to working with kids?
Oh, um, well, with kids, you kind of have to corral them in a certain direction when you want to move forward. Adults are no different. They love to take a long break and like to hang out by the chai table. Um, and so it's in those ways very similar. But of course, adults are so different because you can take things deeper. And I feel like madrasa teachers was a really neat experience because I got to influence um, how they influence their classes, and it was in such a wider scope, and that was really neat for me to see that I could have that impact. I never really thought as a teacher that that would be a role for me, but it was something that myself and another teacher that I know from the mosque, we were both talking about madrasa, and we were saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could take what we know about schools and what we know about madrasas and bring them together and bridge the gap a little bit. And that's what we tried to do. So we started that in the Vancouver Madrasa, and then it kind of took off, and we were able to work with other teachers in North America as well.
That sounds pretty cool. So earlier you mentioned something about when you're trying to teach kids, you have to really engage them.
Yeah.
And there was something you mentioned earlier that really, I guess, really struck me, and it was bringing the learning to life. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely at the core of my philosophy. I feel like, um, nowadays information is so readily available. Everybody has information in their back pockets, in their phones. So if they really wanted to know something, they could just Google it, for example. And in the past, that's what teachers were. They were the givers of information. And now the role of the teacher has really evolved into something that is different. It's now you're not necessarily giving information. You're giving kids the tools to take information and apply it or think about it or bring it to life. And so that's really at the core of what I like to do in my classroom. So whenever I can, I try to make things more meaningful by having some real life examples. So one thing I did last year was we were doing a science unit, and we were talking about the life cycle. And we did the typical, worksheets, and we did a little bit videos and stuff like that. We did, the typical stuff. But I knew somebody who had a farm, and he had eggs. And so I talked to him and I said, hey, could you do this program in my classroom? And it was the first time he had ever done it too. But he had an incubator. He brought fertilized eggs in, and he taught the kids about what the different stages were for the eggs. And we were able to bring them into the classroom, and the kids were turning the eggs. One really cool activity we did often was we would candle the eggs, or we would turn off all the lights and hold a flashlight to the eggs. And so the kids could see inside the eggs what stage the embryo was at, and the different parts of the embryo. And that was amazing for the kids. And then, of course, when the fertilization stage was over and they were ready to hatch, one of the stages where one of the chicks on side will start to pip, which is make a small hole, and after that it's about a 24-hour cycle that you have to wait. But we weren't sure when it was going to happen, so I had some kids set up on egg patrol, and their job was to just sit at the back table and watch the eggs. And if they thought there was some action at the eggs, they would call us over and we would watch. And sure enough, that day we had one of the eggs hatch, and this little chick was coming to life right before their eyes. And for me, it was a real pivotal moment in my career because I've never seen such awe in kids, and they just all of a sudden everything clicked, and it was really exciting and engaging, and they loved it, and they still talk about it. Even the kids if I don't teach them anymore, they still come talk to me about it. Remember that day we had the eggs hatch? They named the chick Hercules because it was just such a strong chick that happened to hatch so quickly, and they loved it. And yeah, it was such an exciting moment. So I try and do things like that whenever I can. I take them out of the building whenever I possibly can. We will go for a walk, a nature walk. If we're doing writing, we'll try and do our writing outside. If we're doing art, we'll try and do it outside. We have a garden in our school, so I try and make use of that. So yeah, I think that's probably the things that I'd like to do in the classroom to kind of bring it to life.
Right. So it's really important not just to teach them, but to really show them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And let them experience it. I think things become more meaningful when you experience it.
Right. So what's a typical day like in your role?
So I usually get to work around 8ish, and the school starts around 8:40. I try to be as prepared as I possibly can. I think by nature I'm not super organized, but as I've become a teacher, I've realized how important it is to be organized. So that's something that I worked on for myself. So I think things have to be kind of organized and set into place. I have to think about what I want, what my goal is for the kids. Otherwise, things can get chaotic, and they come to school around 8:40, and then we start on our day, and our day looks different every single day. So we might be doing language arts. We might be doing language arts is pretty much reading, writing, or oral language or
Right.
speeches. We might be doing math. We might be doing science that day. So every day looks a little bit different, which is actually one of the things that I love about my job. No day looks the same. And then the school structure, as you know, can kind of be very systematic. We have recess at 10:30, we have lunch at 12 o'clock, and then the day's over at 3. But my day doesn't usually end at 3. I'm usually there after school, either collaborating with other teachers or preparing things for the next day or meeting with my principal or vice principal about other things as well. So yeah, I guess that's about it.
Right. So teaching is not just a job; it's actually your life too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is in some ways. I think my philosophy of always learning is definitely part of my life, but I have to make sure that I have that balance because it can take over my life, but I don't want it to because I need to have that balance as well. So I have a lot of other things that I do with my family and my friends, and I have to make sure that I make time for those as well.
Right. Okay. And have you ever had like a challenge that really, I guess, made you really think about what you're doing or transform your career in any way?
Yeah, I mean, there's always moments actually. Teaching can be really challenging, and depending on the country that you're teaching in, or the state or the province that you're teaching in, funding is different. So sometimes our education system isn't funded as well as it is in other countries, which can be frustrating. But that being said, all the pros that I see outweigh all of that. And so seeing those little sparks definitely makes it where I want to be. But I do remember this one student who was really a challenge, and he really challenged me because I didn't know where to go with him. He was really difficult behavior wise and academic wise. He was, hiding under the tables. He was aggressive, and I didn't really know what to do. And I was getting frustrated. He made it difficult for me to want to come to school. And I know he was making it difficult for a lot of the other kids too. So in that case, I was kind of at a very low point, and it was when my principal noticed that things were not going well, and I talked to her about it, and that's when I realized that the great thing about teaching is that not only do you have this community within your classroom, but you have this community amongst the staff members and even amongst your district if you choose to make the most of it. So I had this great community in my school, and they realized that what I was struggling with, and it was great that I was able to reach out to them and reach out to the other professionals in the building, the counselor, the psychologist, and we were able to come together and find a plan for this little boy and support him in the way that he needed. So I would say that would probably be my most challenging event, but the way that I solved it was just to reach out to all these other great people in the building that I knew could support me. So
Okay. So you went from being, I guess, fighting out on your own, and then you realize you're actually a community that everybody's willing to pitch in and help out.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think having that collaborative approach definitely within the classroom and then even just amongst your staff is just such a strength. And if you can promote it amongst yourself and with other people, I think it's really a great thing to have.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening live to the uMentor Talk Show, where we're chatting with Salma Jaffer on her role as an elementary school teacher. Coming up in the next half hour, we have Samir Dinani, who is an associate director of the bioethics program at Columbia University. So I have to change up the, I guess, the gears a little bit, Salma. So if I'm a high school student or a university student, how do I get into the teaching profession?
So first of all, I would definitely say that you find out if it's a good fit for yourself. So volunteer in your local madrasa or volunteer in your local school. And I did both, and it was great for me to see to ensure that that was a good fit for me. So make sure that you are doing that and making sure that you are finding out if that's a good fit. So that would be number one. And then find out what your requirements are by going to the counselors at your university. They will, or at the college, they'll tell you if that's what you need to do, what path you need to take. Like I said, it's different from province to province and from state to state. So find out for your area. And if you see yourself moving somewhere in the next little bit, find out from them as well. So for me, it was a 4-year degree and then a 1-year teaching program.
Interesting. And if you go back to your high school and college days, is there one thing you wish somebody had told you about your profession that you wish you had known earlier?
Um, I guess I one thing that I really yeah, I guess it's to be adaptable and be flexible. Um, I think adaptability is probably the best skill you can have in this job because, like I said, no 2 days are the same and no two kids are the same. So, because you're working with children and people, it's important to be flexible and adaptable to the situation and kind of not let it get you down if things are if not going your way or the way you had planned. Some of my best lessons have started from something I was unexpecting. It was unexpected, and I was like, oh, okay, well, let's go with this. And all of a sudden, it turns into this really engaging and deep learning moment. So I think, yeah, adaptability is probably the best thing you can have for yourself.
That sounds like valuable advice. So for those people who are going to the profession, besides adaptability, are there any other pieces of advice you can give them to sort of propel them forward in the careers? Because from what I hear, teaching is not like I guess, static kind of profession. It's always changing.
Yeah, and I guess the other piece I would say is just never stop learning. Definitely read as many books as you can. Um, Take courses, learn from other people. I think the best teachers that I've seen are ones that never stop learning themselves because kids change, technology changes, our world changes. So if we are going to be given the opportunity to influence kids, then we have to be able to meet their needs, and like I said, those are always changing, right? So like right now in the classroom, I'm teaching coding. I never would have expected to be teaching coding in the classroom, but
Right, especially the third and fourth grade level.
yeah, but I am, and it's awesome, and it's definitely not my strength, but I'm just bringing the tools into the classroom. We have robots in our school, so I've brought them into the classroom and I've given the kids the opportunity and I've given them skills, problem solving skills, critical thinking skills, and then they kind of take it over and they're doing amazing at it. They're taking the lead and coming to me when they need help and I can help them with that, but I'm just kind of setting the stage for their learning. So that's what I mean when I say I feel like the role of that teacher has changed a little bit, right? So yeah, so we do things like that in the classroom, which I wasn't expecting to teach when I first started. So
Right, right. And do you ever feel like some parents who I guess expect you to babysit their kids too? Because I've heard a lot of feedback from different people saying teachers should teach and parents should I guess babysit. Do you ever feel like you have to also watch out for the kids in terms of the behavior and so on?
yeah, and every family is different. And I think when we go into education or if you go into anything without any judgment, I think people move forward much more quickly. And I think whenever I come into any of my classes, I really make it very clear that we're all part of a team, myself, the student, and the parent. And if one of us is not doing our best, then that child is not going to be moving forward. And because I think I come in with that approach, parents really appreciate that, and they know that, and they know I leave the lines of communication open, and it's an open door policy in my classroom. Parents can come in anytime and talk to me about what they need. But that being said, like I said, it's a team, so I make it really clear that this is what I'm going to be doing, and this is what your child needs to be doing, and this is what you need to be doing to support them. So I think if our expectations of one another are all really clear, we all rise to them, and then in the end we end up influencing really these kids who are going to be taking on the leadership roles in the future.
Right. So education starts young. The future leaders, I guess, are sort of bred at a very early stage.
Oh, absolutely. And I often say to I had this one student who was an amazing artist. I said to her, and she struggled in school, and I said to her, "One day you're going to have this fantastic art show, and you're going to invite me because I remembered you in grade 3, and I can't wait to see that day." And I hope she does have that art show because I can't wait to go to her art show, you know?
That sounds pretty exciting. So one more question for you. How has Islam helped you on your path to on your professional path?
Yeah, I think it's played a huge role. I mean, of course, it's who I am. So I guess I get to bring in my religion and my faith into the classroom, and I get to influence kids who possibly have never had a positive role model who's of our faith. So uh, when I graduated, it was when 9/11 happened, and it was when I was starting my student teaching. And that was actually the first time that I realized the impression that I was able to make on kids because of my faith. Because in the news, in the media, Islam was having such a negative impact on what people thought Muslims were. And all of a sudden, they came to school and they saw me as their student teacher, and I thought, wow, I can really impact these kids, and I can show them what a true Muslim really is. So I think I've been able to mold um, the impression that people have of Muslims in a positive way, just by being who I am, and I think that's the best thing that I can do is I can just present Muslims in a positive way.
And I think that's a great example to be a teacher in that position. Uh, so thank you so much, Salma. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed having this conversation.
Same here. I'm glad we got to learn a lot more about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
For our audience members, if you have any questions for Salma, please leave them in the comments section of the YouTube channel, and we'll try to get them to the end of the show. Our next panelist is Samir Ladha Dinani, who is an Associate Director of the Bioethics Program at Columbia University. Assalamu alaikum, Samir. Are you there?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Joad. I'm here.
Great.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, and thank you, Sister Salma, as well, for that very thoughtful and informative discussion. Thanks.
So, Samir, you are an attorney by profession, and you also currently serve as the Associate Director of the Bioethics Program at Columbia University. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, sure. So, I kind of got to where I am in a bit of a circular kind of way. As you mentioned, I'm an attorney by profession. And after law school, I actually had the opportunity to work a little bit at the UN for a bit, which I had a wonderful experience. And then subsequently, I joined a corporate law firm, and I was in the corporate law area in project finance, mergers and acquisitions, and other areas. I've always had an interest in kind of transitioning into more policy and academic work as well. So after working at the corporate law firm for a few years, I decided to pursue a master's in bioethics, and subsequently took on greater involvement in the field. So bioethics is an interesting area. A lot of people may not have heard of it, but it touches us in our daily lives in so many different ways, and it deals with issues concerning the ethical, legal, and social implications of advances that we're seeing in medicine and biotechnology. And these advancements are increasingly arising, I think, especially in light of our advancements in technology and medical kind of abilities. So the topics involve typically critical dilemmas that intersect different areas, including law, society, culture, public policy, philosophy, religion, economics, I would say even history. And so it touches all these different areas. And how do we kind of go forward, right? How do we create policies? How do we create laws? How do we create approaches to these very critical issues? And how, as a society, do we respond to them? So these issues, they can range from issues of genetic enhancement, genetic modification. I like to see it as kind of discussions that largely focus on kind of the two endpoints of life. When do we begin and when do we end? How do we begin and how do we end? And
Right.
typically, I think that really highlights critical inflection points in our life. Where do we make decisions? How do we decide? And what does that say about us as a society in a kind of grander kind of scale? So those are kind of issues that deal with the two endpoints of life, but it deals with everything in between as well. I think one of the questions we have, or one of the areas that recently is developing, is also of epigenetics, where we're learning more about how our genetics may not really be defining who we are, how influences in the environment actually shape our genes or can have impacts on our genetic component, genetic makeup. Issues of drugs in the pharmaceutical industry. Are we over-medicating children? Are we an over-medicated society? How do we respond to that? Who is benefiting off of that? And as well as issues of clinical trials and how do we kind of undertake those? At the later endpoint in life, around death, end of life matters. We have the ability to kind of extend life beyond what we could have ever imagined. We have heroic medical measures, but should we always be employing those? Should we always be doing that? And so in kind of approaching these very challenging questions that affect all of us, there are certain kind of frameworks that we use to come to kind of the most reasoned ethical solutions, right? What's morally the right thing to do in these situations? And in that respect, we look at issues of autonomy, of beneficence, of non-maleficence, and justice. So those are kind of the four overarching principles, and they're largely found in medical ethics. So with autonomy, we look at kind of respecting the rights of the individual, letting the individuals make their own choices. With beneficence, we look at doing good. What is in the patient's best interest, for example? In non-maleficence, there's this notion of avoiding harm. We don't want to cause any type of harm. And justice is what is accessible, especially when it comes to vulnerable kind of populations. And so just quickly kind of tying up this portion, I would give a few examples. With autonomy, I would say, there are questions about, let's say there's an instance where there's a brother is in need of a kidney, for example, for whom a sister is a match. If she decides not to give the kidney, that is obviously her own choice. Should she decide not to give the kidney, what are kind of the repercussions? What are the issues? Oftentimes, autonomy is not just an individual's kind of decision to make a decision, but also they're kind of larger familial or maybe communal autonomy. So I'm from a South Asian background. We have traditionally, this idea of deferring oftentimes to elders, our parents, things like that. And so there's a larger sense of autonomy. It's not just about me making a decision for myself, but taking into account other people's considerations and thoughts as well. And when we look at beneficence, oftentimes we also have to look at benefits to whom. Is it just to a person? Is it to the patient? Could it be, for example, if there's a trial going on, a benefit to a future patient? If, let's say, the treatment is not going to help the patient who's actually going to be in a trial, maybe they're doing it, for larger altruistic reasons. And even when we look at non-maleficence, we try and do a risk-benefit analysis, because when we do undergo any treatment, when we do undergo any kind of trials or research or anything like that, there are risks associated with that. So we always look at, well, will the benefits outweigh the risks? So if someone is going through chemotherapy, there's obviously going to be detriment, but are the benefits going to outweigh that, and does it make sense in those kind of situations? And finally, and when we look at justice, I think can be thought in different ways by different people. So when I say justice, it could mean something completely different from what you think is justice. So there are particularly three kind of ways we can approach justice. One, maybe that everyone gets the same, that there is kind of this rationing of resources and everyone is entitled to the same amount, no matter what their needs might be. The second aspect, or the second way of looking at justice and how do we approach justice in kind of creating policies and legislation and laws, we can look at who needs more. And whoever needs more perhaps should get more. And I'm specifically kind of referencing in my mind here the healthcare debate that is kind of raging in the United States right now. And I look to our benevolent neighbors further up north, Canada and other places, where I think the approach to healthcare is a much more humane and, in my opinion, appropriate approach, where there's a universal right to healthcare. Everyone gets it, and it's considered a right rather than a good. So this is really kind of point and center when we look at justice, right? How do we kind of view issues of justice and how do we frame them? And then obviously another way of looking at justice is those who contribute more get more. And that's kind of how our healthcare system works in the United States, that, you know, it's based on who can contribute, who can pay for healthcare. And by and large, you know, they will be entitled to healthcare. Of course, there are caveats to that. People can go to the emergency room and get healthcare and all of that. But by and large, these are kind of perspectives and viewpoints that govern how we create legislation, how we create policy, and how we view ourselves as human beings in a larger society as well.
That sounds very interesting. So you sort of alluded to my next question, which is for the students who are going through the bioethics program, what kind of careers do they go on to pursue once they get the master's degree?
I think that's a great question. And bioethics in and of itself, people can go into research, they can go into, they can become clinical ethicists, they can go into IRBs, which are institutional review boards that actually are responsible for governing issues surrounding human subject research. They can go into research compliance. In and of itself, there are a number of kind of areas. A lot of people will then pursue PhDs, possibly go into teaching. There are other career paths as well in medicine, nursing. For example, in our program, it's a graduate program. We have about a third of our students are looking to go into either medicine or law. We also have a third that are already physicians or lawyers and are looking to kind of either pivot in their careers or kind of enhance their careers in different ways. So as a field, there are many, because of the interdisciplinary nature of it, there are many, many different aspects and areas that potential students could go into. So I would say clinical ethics, research ethics, medicine, nursing, public health, regulatory government work, pharmaceutical industry, and even healthcare technology, which is becoming increasingly important, especially in light of AI and big data and issues of privacy and artificial intelligence. Law is another area, obviously, journalism and publishing, academia, teaching. And a lot of our students also are interested in the nonprofit and think tank sectors as well.
That sounds very exciting. So it's a growing field then, right?
Yeah, it's a growing field, and I think I would argue that it's becoming increasingly more and more important in light of all of these different areas, because it touches whatever profession a person is in. I think these issues of bioethics are coming up and are becoming increasingly important.
So that's that's what the current program addresses. Now, I would like you to take us a little bit back when you were a high school student or a university student. How did you decide to get involved in law in the first place?
That's an interesting question. So I initially was thinking that I would want to go to medical school. And when I was a freshman in college, I took a course. It was my first semester as a freshman, and I took a course on the Supreme Court. It was a seminar, and it was about 20 students, and we had, interestingly, we had about 10 TAs in the class. So we had one TA, teaching assistant, per 2 students. The course met. It was a seminar course. It met on Monday evenings from 6 to 10 p.m. and it was a course on the Supreme Court and the religion clauses. It was by far the best course I've taken to date, took at that time and to date in my undergraduate career. And it was very, very interesting because we went through Supreme Court legislation and Supreme Court case law, looking at 4 or 5 cases in each session, and we'd have to draft a memo, like a 5-page memo each week. on a specific case, and they were all religion and First Amendment cases. So that sparked my interest in the law. I saw it as an evolving and dynamic area where actually there's a lot of contributions that I think we needed to that we can make as Muslims and as as part of civic society as well. So I thought it was a very dynamic, interesting area, and that kind of sparked my interest in the field. Subsequently, I had gone to a trip. I was in Europe with my brothers, a couple of my brothers, and some of my cousins. And we had gone to Geneva, and we ended up at the United Nations there. And as I was sitting in the General Assembly, we were taking the tour, I thought, man, it would be so cool to kind of work in this environment. And it was just a fleeting thought. And I'm not even joking, but I came back from that trip. And a few weeks later, I was, again, in my undergraduate at the time, there was an opportunity that a friend of mine had heard of, and it was something atypical, where there was a role that had opened up where it was an internship, and part of the internship included attending UN sessions. And I said, that's great. So I applied for it, and fortunately, I was lucky enough to get it. And it was just kind of staggering in my mind that within literally, I think it was about 6 weeks from, going to the UN in Geneva, I suddenly had this opportunity that I had could have ever imagined. So sometimes I think, where we end up, sometimes there are these like fortunate accidents that happen. And so that was one for me. I feel like it was kind of a pivotal moment for me. And that experience, that internship at that time, which then, later kind of further solidified my interest.
That's pretty interesting. So how did you, I guess, get started in the law field?
So in the law field, I had worked. I would say that my first experience in the law was real experience. Was a part-time job that I had as a junior in college, and that entailed. Literally, I was trying to figure out, I needed a job, a part-time job, something, something which, I could use to bolster my resume, or at least put down on my resume. I had looked at a bunch of job postings on the NYU. I did my undergraduate at NYU, so I'd looked at the career services websites and tried to get information on different kind of internships and jobs, send out my resume. I hadn't heard anything back. I was kind of getting concerned. A lot of my friends at that time had found part-time jobs and things like that. So a buddy of mine, a good friend of mine from college, one day, even he was struggling with finding the right internship. We just decided one afternoon that, what, we're just gonna print off like a bunch of our resumes and just go around and just give them out. And he was also interested in kind of pursuing a career in law. So we printed off about 200, I remember I printed off about 200 resumes of mine, and we just kind of pounded the pavement. We went to the financial district downtown in Manhattan and walked around, went into every single building that would let us in, and checked their register, checked their directory to see if there were any law firms there. And if we were allowed to, we'd go up there and just drop off a resume. We got yelled at, we kind of split up. You went in one part of this, the one part of the city, I went in another, and then we kind of rotated so that it wouldn't be both of us at the same time. But we literally, I think I spent 5 hours that day, 5 or 6 hours, going into random buildings and random kind of law firms and just dropping off a resume. And I got more than a few people who yelled at me and said that you can't be doing this. But there were other places that took my resume that said we'll be in touch if anything opens up. And luckily, the next week I got a call back from one of the places. It was an estates and trusts legal practice, a law firm in downtown, and they were looking for someone who might be interested in a part-time position. And so I interviewed, and that was my first part-time experience. So I would say just to kind of, one thing I'd like to highlight, I think, with respect to that is that sometimes it can be frustrating, right? When we're going through the natural channels or the channels that we're taught to go through, looking at job postings, looking online, putting our resumes here and there, which everyone is doing. I think it's really important to sometimes try and approach it from a bit of an unconventional way. And, maybe what I did, in this day and age, maybe it's not as easy to get access, into these buildings and things like that. But at that time, that was one way. So I would recommend that for students, for people, for high school students, for college students that are interested in getting more experience, more things on their resume, everyone is going to be doing what, kind of a baseline, right? Everyone's going to be sending in their resumes. Everyone's going to be, getting maybe some advice, some feedback on resumes on how to kind of approach these things. One thing I would suggest is try and do something, think a little bit outside of the box, do something unconventional, because sometimes that may be a way that gives you a bit of an advantage.
And I think that's really valuable advice that everybody who's really interested in a certain field needs to stand out.
Yeah,
okay.
So I agree with you.
Yeah. So what do you do? I guess what's a typical day in your job right now?
So it's interesting, and just kind of reiterating what Sister Salma said, that there is really not like a typical day that I have. I'm obviously dealing oftentimes with students and courses and kind of the program aspect of it and developing it, and we also have some liaisons and collaborations with external organizations outside of Colombia, and so kind of managing those, dealing with those. There's a lot of meetings, and there's never a dull day. There's always something that comes up. But I think the critical thing is that we have to approach whatever we do, right, with a sense of renewed beginning every day, because I think that keeps it fresh. I think it doesn't make it stale. I think it's very easy for us as human beings to fall into kind of a very routine, complacent pattern. I know I feel that way oftentimes, but I think it's very important to remind ourselves. One, I think it's important to step back and think about kind of the where we are in light of so many others, right? And kind of appreciate what we have and approach each day with that kind of appreciation. And again, that's difficult, I think, because we have stresses, we have a lot of demands sometimes on us. But I think it's really important to take a few minutes in the morning and just kind of exhale and enjoy what's coming, despite how crazy it may get. So.
Right. And do you ever have challenges with, say, your work-life balance in your current role?
I do. I mean, I think it's. I wouldn't necessarily say it's challenges, or I don't necessarily find it as challenging now as I did when I was at the corporate law firm. I think the demands in that area of the law are can be unreasonable sometimes. You're working many more hours than you probably should be, and I think it impacts your life outside of work. I think work does become largely your life, which is not a bad thing, because I think when you're young, I think it's important to work hard and give it your all. And I think you should always kind of have that kind of approach to work and kind of a work ethic that way. I think that things in this day and age, I believe that most people are probably have some level of flexibility in their work, but that also means that they're working at hours that they typically or traditionally may not have otherwise been working. So although we have these conveniences of having our emails on our phones and always being available, that gives us some level of flexibility, right? But it also in tandem requires us to perhaps work on the weekends, or put in a few hours here and there in the evenings. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that the nature of work is shifting as well. And in that, I think it's important to try and find a balance that works, for each person individually, because it can become more difficult if there's no kind of standard 9 to 5 hours.
Right. Speaking of challenges, is there any one major challenge that you have experienced that was transformative in your career?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that challenges are something we experience every day, right? And I think they shape us, they mold us, they really kind of make us who we are in a lot of ways, right? The adversities we face and the difficulties we encounter, how we respond to them, really they kind of are a measure of who we are at that time, and they also kind of help make us better, right? So I think that being said, I think one of the biggest challenges I faced in my career is, and I think lawyers oftentimes face this, and
Right.
it can be difficult because sometimes I think there are moments in our job, in when you're at a law firm, for example, and you may be confronted with an ethical dilemma that you don't feel comfortable, and in the approach perhaps that is being employed. and you're kind of stuck because you feel that maybe some of the work that you're doing may not be in line with your moral compass. And at that moment, I think it's really important to stop, right? I think it's really important to take stock. I think it's really important to realize that what our beliefs are, what we stand for, what we kind of value, what our moral kind of perspectives may be, and what our religion says about these kind of dilemmas. Those should be our kind of guiding principles. And oftentimes, I think it's very easy if we don't stop and take stock and think about that at that time. It's very easy to go down a slippery slope, right? And make concessions that we otherwise wouldn't make or feel comfortable making. And that can be problematic. So I think what's really, really important is when we are confronted, and I'm speaking about as someone in the legal field, when I've experienced challenges that maybe I found ethically challenging or morally kind of challenging for me, I've always tried to kind of stop and kind of just take stock of the situation. Not that I've always been successful, but I think it's important to do that. And if we do that, I think the right answer or the most appropriate answer is pretty apparent. And at that point, I think it's important to kind of do what is in line with who you are and what your morality and what your religion tells you to do. Because I think ultimately, if we do that, even if in the moment or in that immediate aftermath, you may face some criticism, I think people you work with will come out on the other end. And I think I think by and large, people respect principles and values, and especially if they're founded on certain religious kind of understandings or perspectives. So I think it's really important to do that. And obviously, if I firmly believe that if we are trying to do the right thing, and we don't always do the right thing, right? Like, I can think of many, many times where I may not have done the right thing. But when we try to do the right thing, I think, more than anything else, we also have Allah on our side. And that, I think, is the most reassuring aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable advice. You're listening live to the uMentor Talk Show, where we're currently chatting with Samir Ladadinani, who's Associate Director of the Bioethics Program at Columbia University. And we chatted with Salma Jaffer in the previous half hour on her role as an elementary school teacher. If you have any questions for us, Salma or Samir, please leave them in the comment section of the YouTube channel, and we'll get that to them at the end of the show. Samir, I have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
What's the best thing about your job?
The best thing about my job, I think, I would say that it's the ability to really interact with students. I really, really enjoy that. I enjoy the level of interaction. I think it's refreshing. I think there is this part of me that sees, like when I was saying about careers and job perhaps getting it's easy for things to get stale. I think that seeing the spark in someone's or seeing like a spark in an interest that someone might have, I think it's really reaffirming and reassuring, and I think that really is refreshing for me personally. I think the other aspect that I really enjoy, and I think is the best is one of the best kind of aspects of what the field that I'm in, is that these issues that we're discussing, I think they're critically important, not just in societal terms, but I think in religious terms. I think we're confronting issues that we don't necessarily have clear answers about, and I think it highlights a really dynamic kind of and evolving discourse that's happening in our religious jurisprudence as well. And I think that's a testament to the contemporary nature of our religion as well. That Islam has this ability to respond. It's elastic, right? It has this ability to respond to even the most cutting edge contemporary issues by approaching a spirit of the law's approach, where we look at what does Islamic law or how does our jurisprudence approach these issues, even though these issues did not exist at the time when the Prophet was here. How do we kind of infuse that spirit into what we're experiencing today? And seeing that kind of evolution, I think is really one of the best parts of what I'm seeing in my career in the field of bioethics. And so I think that's really it just is a testament to the elasticity and the relevance of our religion as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Going back to your profession as a lawyer and also as your current role, were there any coursework that you had to take in order to get to where you are, and any additional coursework you took that may have helped you to get to this point?
Yeah, so I took for in the United States, the traditional kind of trajectory or the traditional path to become a lawyer is you do the 4 years undergraduate degree and then a 3-year law school. So it's a Juris Doctorate, and that's 3-year law degree. Subsequent to that, you take the bar exam, and once you pass the bar, you're proficient. You're deemed proficient rather to practice law in any area. But obviously that requires some experience, and that's why I think it's really important for students to get internships, to get experience, even if they know, okay, I want to be a lawyer. Well, what kind of lawyer do you want to be? Get experience in different areas of the law, because the law is so diverse. It is, you can practice law in any area. So what areas are you interested in? I had a keen interest in international human rights, and so I kind of sought out interest in that, and then generally international law as well. And so kind of identify the areas that you're interested in, get some experience in that, and with that experience, and if once you finish law school, or once a student finishes law school, they can then kind of go into a specific niche, a specific specialty of the law, and practice in that area. For me, I also then subsequently got the bioethics background, because I felt I had pigeonholed myself a little bit, having worked in corporate law for a bunch of years. I really didn't have any experience, much experience rather, outside of that, and some human rights experience. So I needed to kind of diversify my portfolio a little bit, and the MS, the Masters in Bioethics that I did, helped me do that, and kind of expand my breadth so that I could use my law degree in a different way.
And going back to high school and college once again, what's one thing about your profession you wish somebody had told you earlier that you now know?
What is something someone would have told me earlier that I now know?
Right, that would have helped you in your career?
I think there's a couple of things I would say. One is, do what you want to do. You're going to have a lot of people that will give you advice, and very well-intentioned advice. Each of us, I think, knows internally what we are built for, right? What we are made for, and what makes us tick, what makes us get up in the morning, right? And sometimes we second guess that, so I would say, one, know yourself, know what your interests are, and two, don't second guess those interests. I think that's really, really important, because I think sometimes, doubt or questions about your own level abilities or confidence, can really divert a person. And so I think it's really, really important to be kind of firm if you know what you want to do, and kind of don't let your own self derail you from that either. And I think ultimately I would just end with saying that it's really important, I think, to do good, right? Whatever we do, whatever aspect we're in, whatever profession, whatever career, anyone may decide to go in, I think that it is essential that we kind of push the needle in a positive direction, right? Not just for us or for our immediate families, but, in small incremental ways for our society as well. And things that, hopefully will then cause a rippling effect, right, over time. And we only live for 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. I think it's really, really important that whatever we do, there has to be an aspect of goodness in that, or trying to at least move ourselves and our society in some type of positive trajectory. I think that's really important, and I think it's also our religious responsibility to do that, given the kind of resources that we've been blessed with.
I think that's very valuable advice to have as well. So I have a question for both Salma and Samir. So Salma, are you still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, so a question for both of you, and Salma can go first. So what else besides your academics, like for example, sport, public speaking, or other types of activities, really helped you, and would suggest as being really valuable for students going into your profession?
Uh, did you ask me to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
All right. I would say find a to find well I mean I've stressed a lot about keeping your learning going and making sure that you are always learning new things and immersing yourself in trying to keep things as current as possible. So I would say definitely trying to keep on top of things in that respect, but I think also finding people that are aligned with you, with similar values, with similar goals. It's good to have one person or a group of people that is that you can rely on when you do have struggles, or when you have questions, or you need some motivation, or someone to celebrate with when things are going well. So I know for myself, I do have people who are also in the same field, and it's nice to have those people to rely on when I need it, or to talk about when something's not working in my classroom. So I would say definitely those two things would be my go-tos.
Okay, and Samir?
Yeah, and I would just add, I think those are great points, and I agree. I agree with them as well. I think it's also important to do something that's unrelated. I think sometimes having a hobby that is outside of what you're spending 8 hours a day doing, or having an activity, or being involved in a sport, doing something that is actually unrelated, I think is actually very good for your career, because I think it gives you a mental break. I think it takes you away, and you can reapproach the next day or the next hour with kind of a fresh eye. So I think that's also very, very important to do.
I think that's really good advice for our youth. Um, so at this time, I would like to thank both of you for really inspiring our next generation, and thank you for dedicating about an hour of your valuable time on a Saturday.
No, thank you very much, Jawad, and thank you so much as well.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. If you have any other questions for our panelists, you may reach out to them on our online platform at umojooutreach.org/unleashthefuture/groups, or just visit the uMentor website and hit the link for online platform. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to listen to exciting and inspiring stories from another panel of speakers. Thank you for listening to today's panel on YouTube Live. You can always catch up on our previous shows on SoundCloud or uMentor Talk Show podcast.